Wanted to start actually with a question for Yesenia. Well, actually, just first, one of the things that I love best about your talk is this idea of the translation of the brand, sort of like instead of sort of asking like which do you like better, it frames the discussion in a certain way. And I'm wondering how much of that, like, do you go into conversations with clients, or that you used to go into conversations with clients? How much prep work did you do, and how much thinking did you do in terms of how to present things to get them in the right frame of mind?
Yeah. So at times like that, I was working with clients that had very strong marketing teams, very opinionated marketing teams, as they should. So sometimes working with clients that have maybe a marketing partner or a marketing team, the web designers could be kind of lower on the totem pole. So I'd have to figure out ways to guide conversations so that it would seem like, we're the experts in conveying the brand online, and we know how, the best way to do this, but you're the expert in your brand. So, it needs to be a conversation. And I think that, being subtle in that way and framing conversations in that way and making it feel like this is a decision we're coming to together helps sell points much more than me saying, no, you're only going to have one typeface, because then it's just going to be a fight.
I was struck by the fact, performance as a topic tends to be a topic that's incredibly technical, but each talk really was talking about the people in the process, whether it was, talking to clients and or whether it was trying to figure out what end users were doing. And so, Steve, as you're working with organizations and they're starting to go through this process and sort of thinking about custom metrics, do you find that the organizations have to think back to try to answer that question that Jeremy was talking about what is the core functionality on the page? Like, do they have to, or they already know that definition, or is that something that they haven't really even thought about because they were able to use some sort of simplistic measure that they were, whether it was on page load or something like that in the past?
Typically, it requires a bit of time and discussion on their side. There isn't, different parts of the organization will know what they think the core functionality or critical content is, but that answer is different across different parts of the org. So it takes them a while to all sit down at the table together and identify which piece or pieces of content they really want, or functionality they really want to focus on.
Interesting. So, and Ola, you had, a lot of your story is really about the challenges you had organizationally to get people to buy in. And sort of at the end, you talked just briefly about this idea that there were sort of impacts in parts of the organization that you didn't expect. I wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit, and some of the places that you saw changes or teams that were impacted that you didn't know were going to be impacted.
I could say for sure would be the merchandising team. Mm-hmm. So again, 20-minute talk split between two of us. It's a little hard to show everything. But looking at what was being done before, I keep describing it as they're making the POVs or the hero images work too hard, where they're trying to cram a ton of stuff and a ton of links into one little image. And that's just the system that they were using because that's what they had available to them at the time. And it definitely was not mobile friendly. And so by having to start working mobile first and really think about if we're going to do this and actually really go for it and create a system that is achievable in 4 months, we have to start reducing the amount of content that's in these images to actually make it scalable everywhere. And this was definitely a tricky point, to get people to understand that you can't have 8 links in an image. It kind of just has to be one. So...
That was probably a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So if people want to start queuing up for questions, I had one other question, Yesenia. So you recently made a move to Vox, and Vox sort of famously recently declared performance bankruptcy. So that's sort of the public-facing version of what happened. I guess maybe if you could sort of explain a little bit about that, and then tell us a little bit about what that's meant internally. I'm curious about how that has impacted the organization.
Yeah, so we have a performance team, and I think they started working on the performance of the site a little bit before I started. So a little bit of the backstory of that I'm not too sure about. But they spend every day optimizing and optimizing a lot of the way that web fonts are served, and just a lot of getting ads to load asynchronously. So they do a lot of work every single day to make these improvements. So that's something that we're working on with our existing properties and making sure that we're no longer in performance debt. And then on the flip side of that, some of the new work that I'm working on, we're just being really mindful from the beginning about designing with performance budgets and keeping performance in mind. I think there was a lot of rolling out brands very quickly, and in one of my other talks, I talk about that same experience that I had with MTV, where we needed to roll out a site in 3 months, and optimizing things for performance just didn't happen. But it's really great that we can take that time and make these incremental improvements and kind of adopt that philosophy throughout the entire company.
That's great. That's great. Do we have questions from the audience here? Microphones. I did notice on Twitter, Ola, that you were blowing people's minds with this idea of saving things at smaller Jpeg compression and then shrinking them down. And is it working well? Are you seeing any issues? Like, I know that there have been some discussions or concerns about like memory usage or things of that nature with those images.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we sort of considered and knew that was a downside of doing this, but I think so far it's kind of one of the things, again, where it's sort of like there's some happy medium that you have to sort of strive for, and so far it hasn't been a problem, and we're hoping, hopefully with sort of the way devices are going, that maybe it'll be less of a problem going forward. But we definitely recognize that that's sort of a trade-off there.
We've got questions over here.
Hello. This question is for Ola and Minnie. I know that you guys maintain a fantastic pattern library at Walmart, and I was wondering if you could sort of speak to how that all works through the lens of performance. Has that sort of helped you, sort of steer the organization in the right direction, or how has the pattern library affected how your organization perceives performance?
Brad with the pattern library question.
Surprise.
Well, I could say just from what we were doing, we kind of had to introduce new patterns. So it's really looking at that same concept and saying, here's, again, what do we have available to us, and really starting to make new rules that didn't exist in the past. So.
Yeah, and we sort of had to do the same thing for Walmart Grocery, because we were sort of a new kid on the block at the time, and again, we try to coordinate across the org in general, but we were the first to go responsive, and so there were things that just didn't exist, and so we also had to sort of make sure we're in sync. And
did those things go back into the pattern library?
We're trying to make sure it does, and we've started doing that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Question over there.
Hi, I think this is for Steve. I'm not a web ops guy, and we sometimes get 10 people hitting a website at once. Is there an online tool to automagically be able to test for concurrent users hitting a site? You had a slide that showed worldwide users connecting to one website. And I'm just curious if anyone knows of a tool that would help for testing.
So I think the question was about load testing, that performance might vary if you have 10 people hitting the site at the same time versus just one. Generally, that's not true unless you have a really powered server. And the other thing from the performance golden rule is we know that less than 10 or 20% of the user experience wait time is spent on the back end. So even if the users have to wait a little bit more on the back end, they're probably not going to notice it. Hopefully, if you're doing the right things with performance, like cache times and gzipping, the user won't have to hit the server for, if the average is like 100, 107 requests per page now, hopefully only 10 or 20 of those will have to actually hit the server. But are there tools? Yeah, there are load testing tools. SOSTA that does the world's best rum product, Impulse, also makes their money on load testing. There's Load Runner from HP. I don't think they're worth using.
No, There's a question over here. Yeah.
Hi, this is for Ola and Minnie. The 10% optimization seems really low, but also somewhat arbitrary. I'm wondering how you came about that. Did you adjust it and visually look at it to see if that was as low as you could possibly go before too many artifacts showed up, or what?
So it's actually a combination of all of those. And I know, again, this is a sort of 20-minute talk, but it's going to depend on the image and the content. So how much of the photographic content is versus parts that are not, and where text starts to look bad. So I know we use that number, but it's going to depend on sort of like the actual image.
Yeah, there's examples you look at, and you can actually make it 0. It was crazy. He told me, I didn't believe him. So.
Yeah, and I think also the source matters. So like if you're starting with something that's already bad, you're going to have to dial the number up to get it to look good. So. Yeah.
Oh, there's somebody in the back as well, and then down here. Yep.
Is it on?
Hello.
Okay.
Just 1 second.
Oh.
There's somebody. Yeah. Yes, you. Sorry, in the back first, and then down here.
Great.
We got 2 microphones, so sorry.
So my question is around setting a performance budget, like strategies around determining that point. Like a site like Walmart, I'm imagining, would have a pretty different performance budget than a site that was primarily serving up text.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little curious. So Yesenia, how have you gone about setting the budgets? And then Ola and Minnie, when you were looking at images, how you were setting them? And then Steve, I guess everybody here, you've all worked with performance budgets.
Yeah, for the sites that I worked with at HappyHog and even at Vox, it's been mainly looking at competitors and seeing, start render time and page weight and doing comparisons. I think, was it Tim Cadleck that has that 20% rule where you calculate, you want to be 20% faster when you, so people can see a difference. But mainly it's been kind of looking at competitors and trying to be faster than them.
I think it's kind of the same thing for us, at least with the Walmart grocery part of the site, was before responsive, we had certain performance level, and definitely want to make sure that when we went responsive that we didn't blow that. And so that was sort of like at least a benchmark to start from.
So you're benchmarking against yourself as well.
And then we looked at our competitors as well.
And Minnie, was that the same for the main site?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's all still a work in progress. So I think it's constantly evaluating and reevaluating what you're doing, and then also looking at the page that the graphics are sitting in as well. So these don't exist in isolation, they exist in a whole page. And so if something else changes, then it's constantly looking and seeing what changes you do need to make. But definitely it was, what did we do before, and can we do hopefully better than we did, and can we do it faster?
And Steve, are you, just generally, where do you think is most effective for people to look at their performance budgets and try to set them?
As much as I love performance, you can get to the point of negative returns just working on performance optimization after optimization. And this is where RUM comes in, has a lot of value, because with tracking your real users, not only can you track performance metrics, you can track the business metrics, you can track cart size, conversion rate, abandonment rate. And so what you can see, there's great talks from Buddy Brewer at SOSTA, the Impulse guys, where you can look at the speed, you can break users down into speed. Like if you're not doing custom metrics, you might look at page load time. So for different page load times, what's the abandonment rate, what's the cart size, what's the conversion rate, and you can actually numerically come up with a value of improving performance. We can make $2 million more a day if we cut 500 milliseconds off the page load time. And so then you can look at those secondary metrics like, well, what is it we have to do to achieve that improvement? We have to cut back JavaScript or images or fonts. And so I think that's really important too, is to look at your performance goals in the context of the business and business metrics.
Interesting. All right, a question down here.
Hi, yeah, my question is for the Walmart folks. Was there any consideration or testing involved with the images by removing the text and making it live text?
Sorry.
Making it what text? I'm sorry.
Live text?
Oh, so
instead
like
of having the text in the
HTML
images?
text
Yeah.
over the images. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were going through the process, we kind of considered a whole host of things, and we kind of, I think, got to the point where it was sort of the timing to get things done, and sort of what it would take for the organization to move in that direction. So I think it's something that we're still looking at across the board, but at this time we felt like that was the right solution.
How often did those images turn? I mean, that's the thing that we had seen in other organizations. Like the images get created so frequently that it's not necessarily realistic to have the markup separated. Like that the assets have to be turned at such a quick basis. Like, is Walmart creating images all the time?
Yes, and lots of them. And I think that my answer to that would be, again, looking at the process of what's in place and the people that you have in place, and then the tools that you have in place, and could you actually do it? And so I think with us on our time frame, this was the solution that made the most sense. Or shall I say, it was the one that was actually attainable in the short time frame. But definitely it's something to consider and experiment with. And then also too, when we were doing even some simple experiments with just compression on images, does it actually compress smaller if you take the text off? And it didn't. So just even simple tests like that when you're trying to evaluate, if I have to put in however much effort to really rebuild our process and tools and everything, are we gonna gain enough from doing that right now in this window? So yeah, I think it's just evaluating what you have to work with.
Yeah, and I think that, as sort of Minnie alluded to in the talk, there's also this idea of like, giving the designers sort of some freedom to sort of express the brand. And sometimes we did some experiments with sort of these text overlays, and it's just, I think the cost of trying to get that at the level of tweaking that they would need would be pretty high this time.
Other questions? Got one down here.
All right, this one's for the Walmart Labs folks. So for scaling your talk was impressive for the sheer scale of the work that had to be done. And so I'm curious, how do you handle scaling down to a point where there's no image? Are there, thousands and thousands of images? Are you guys using any kind of automated technology to implement image descriptions?
I'm sorry, what was the last word? Restrictions?
Descriptions.
Descriptions. Oh, yes. So like making sure that since there are so many images on the site, like accessibility and making sure that there are descriptions and all of that sort of stuff.
So
even besides accessibility,
right.
Just gracefully not loading an image.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, so like in sort of the part of the talk where I sort of talked about the actual process versus the process that we all think about, there's all these other steps that a lot of these go through, and there are different teams that manage that stuff. So we're...
Yes, I'd say the same thing. It's these massive amounts of people on these teams to make everything happen. And there's so many pieces that aren't just about, just create an image and put it in the box and it's fine. It's like, no, it's actually not. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of people that are affected by making these changes. And when you talk about going from a massive amount to 3 times that, it's not just the designers that have to design these things. It's every single person in this huge process that has to touch it. And with these tools that, weren't built to handle responsive images, it just wasn't built that way, and we're trying to, do the best that we can.
It occurs to me that by getting to the point where you have sort of singular images for the most as possible. I know, Ola, you were talking about the fact that the designers do have the option or the discretion to change the images, but that you make it easier then, and you probably have tools in place for as far as descriptions are concerned, where now it's just a singular description that describes the images no matter what size it is, as opposed to if you would propose something that might require changes at 3 breakpoints or something bad like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I would say the same thing too for ours, being able to streamline between pages of when you're reducing the number of, removing the duplication, then you are streamlining the amount of content that actually has to go into the system.
I think we've got time for one last question, if there's another question out there. Have any more? Oh, we've got two. Go back there.
Testing. Hey, quick question when it comes to approaches to performance. We've got a kind of a concept of bundling out there right now with things like Webpack and some of the ideas of entry points, being able to like take the assets for our site and give really unique bundles of assets per, say, homepage or gallery page or landing page. Can you speak to any of those kind of optimizations that you took into account for these kind of, kind of performance metrics that you were looking at?
So this question comes up a lot because some people have written articles about combining scripts and style sheets, and people think that means take all your scripts and put them into one script and take all your style sheets and put them into one style sheet, or create sprite images. And so you do have to look at the patterns, the user patterns through your website. And it's not always the case of bundling everything into one script so that you're downloading a huge bundle of JavaScript, 60% of which is never going to be used on this feature page or this settings page. So that can be kind of a challenging task. A kind of easy workaround to that is to focus on just the assets that need to be downloaded for the very first page view, and then in the background download a huge bundle of stuff and set a cookie. And then the next time the user goes to a page, if you see the cookie, you know that they have the huge, or you're confident they have the huge bundle in the cache. And so that's another technique you can use and then you can use that bundle across the entire website. But even if you can reduce from, the average page today has 22 scripts in it. Like if you can drop that down to 8, you're doing a great job.
All right, I think we need to wrap and take a break. Thank you, Yesenia, Ola, Minnie, Steve. Please give them a round of applause.